Hey guys, it's Rose, and today I'm just doing a wrap-up, kind of a big one because it's for 2 months, because I couldn't really get anything done in June up until now. First up, I've forgotten the order in which I read these, by the way, so first up-ish, is Shopaholic Ties the Knot by Sophie Kinsella. This one was an absolutely perfect choice for this month because, as I had mentioned before, so I'm not going to go into it too much, the reason I've been so busy is that it was my wedding this month. Yay! So this just seemed appropriate. As we know, I love Sophie Kinsella. It's just a continuation of the Shopaholic story and how she spends way too much money and gets into ridiculous trouble while planning her wedding. And it's fun. Next up is definitely also in the beach reading category, and it is Small Changes by Sheila Roberts. It's very typical sort of chick lit women's fiction. It's based around, interestingly though, it's based around 3 women who are trying to fix their money problems in their lives rather than women trying to fix their man problems. And I really like that. I like seeing chick lit that isn't just about finding a guy because, you know, that gets old. There's more to life. Next up is a reread, and that is Gregory Maguire's Wicked. I love this book. You may actually even notice that there is a second copy of this book on the shelf behind me because this was a library book. I picked it up. I remembered how much I love it, and so I actually went out and bought myself a copy. I also have a copy of the follow-up, Son of a Witch, which I started and never... I've tried this a couple of times, starting it, I don't really get into it, I don't get it finished, and I don't really know why, but there you go. This one, though, absolutely phenomenal. One last thing to say about this is that if you've seen the musical and you weren't super impressed, please don't let it put you off the book. I saw the musical after reading it and was kind of really surprised by the fact that they didn't get any of the book in it. It felt so shortened and like there was just not enough, and I was really disappointed in the musical. So if you were to and you haven't read the book, please give it a try anyway. Then we have Silk by Penny Jordan. This was one of only 2 historical fictions that I read in 2 months, which, if you know anything about my reading habits, you know is kind of amazing because I usually read, the majority of my reading is usually historical fiction. This one is about a silk merchant's daughter in the 1920s. It's really phenomenal. It's very, very classic historical female fiction. So her childhood and teen years and coming out in London and the story of her marriage, of her children, of loves and losses and what you have to give up and what you actually get to gain. And there were some really interesting twists to it, and I really, really, really enjoyed it. And I also learned a lot about silk, which is fun because I like learning things. The other historical fiction that I read this month was The Sleeping Dictionary by Sujata Massey. Hope I'm saying that right. This is set in India. It runs from the 30s to around about the 50s. It's really phenomenal. It's just a story of one woman and sort of twists and turns, different places that life takes her, many of them very bad in different ways, some of them really good, and it's not too much of a spoiler, but there is a happy ending, and I love happy endings. And I just love the descriptions of the physical surroundings and the food and the clothes and the colors, and it's a reason that I really, really enjoy historical fiction set in India. I also read, but I no longer have in my house, Cloud Atlas. Obviously a very well-known book. Unfortunately, I was kind of disappointed by it. I'd had other people say that it was really slow. I didn't totally find that. I did find that unfortunately it's just too much like short stories, and I didn't feel like there was enough of a connection for me to really get into it, really, really care about any of the characters. Some of the stories that were very futuristic, I really kind of got those. I would have loved to see more of that, but overall I was kind of disappointed by it. But we know I'm not a short story person, so that is going to explain it, really. Now we're going to do 3 books that I actually didn't totally like over these 2 months, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about these than the others because I didn't really like them. Sorry, I kept hitting the table and the camera's moving. Forgive me. First up, and the one I liked most of these, is Summer in the City. It's by Robin Sisman, or Seisman. Again, it's very simple chick lit. It is the improbable story of two people, strangers from sister advertising companies, who end up doing a apartment and sort of life job swap between New York and London, and discovering plots to screw one of them over and get them fired, and they have to work together. And it's very unrealistic, but a lot of chick lit is, and that doesn't normally stop me from enjoying it. Overall, I did kind of enjoy it in an implausible way. I had one huge, massive sticking point with this, which is kind of a spoiler, but it's not like a brand new book, so I don't feel too bad for spoiling it for you. Which is that in this, the miserable bitch fiancé of the male character goes with him to the female character's apartment as part of the apartment swap, doesn't realize that the girl has a cat, thinks there's this stray cat that keeps coming in and out, and takes it to the vet and has it put down. And the female character, when she finds out about this, is kind of like, meh. It kind of ruined it for me. There's a certain level of implausibility that I'm willing to accept with chick lit or fantasy books or silly books, but the idea that someone could have a cat, even an older cat, and A, have other people coming to live in their apartment and not leave them detailed instructions on things like feeding, blew my mind. Terrible cat owner. B, that someone, if you think there's a stray cat, you go and have it killed? No, that's not a thing. That's not a thing that happens. You take it to a shelter at the very, very minimum, or, given that you're there for a month or so, you just let it happen because it's not your freaking house. It's not your cat. Finally, and of course we have the idea that a vet would put down a healthy cat because it was a stray. I don't know what kind of vet this author has been to in the past, but whoever they are should lose their license. End of story. And finally, the idea that if someone who was staying in your house took your cat and had it put down, I would be taking them to court. I would be reporting them to the police. I would not in any way just be like, oh, okay, I guess I'll fall in love with you now. One of those things that completely ruined this book for me, and other than that, it was kind of good, and so that really made me sad. Next up in the books that I didn't particularly like is Lost in a Good Book by Jasper Fforde, and I was really disappointed that I didn't like this one because the concept is so incredible. And the idea is, it sort of takes place in an alternate universe. Within this alternate universe, there's way too much to explain, but within it, there's the ability to travel into books and through books, and the characters in books wander into other books when no one's reading them and hang out with each other, and that is so cool. And it's a special detective who has to go hide inside books. That's so cool. That's such a fascinating concept. A lot of the rest of it was pretty fascinating as well. The world building there were great concepts, but it was weirdly executed. I spent the good sort of first quarter of the book just confused. And even toward the end, I was like, okay, what? There should have been so much more world building, and I'm not the kind of person that needs something really, really, really laid out, but this just, it felt really sort of jumpy in the middle, and I think that that's because what I later found out, what I couldn't tell from the blurb or the spine or anything, was that it's actually one in a series of, they're called Thursday Next books, because that's the name of the main character. I wish I'd known that, because I make a point of not leaping in the middle of series, because you feel a little bit lost for the first while, and I just wish that someone had made that clear on the back of the book. This is what this space is for. It's for telling people what it is, and that was kind of necessary. It was just kind of odd. It didn't live up to the blurb. It didn't live up to the premise, which was a little disappointing. Last in the books that I didn't really like, and this one I really didn't like, is The Lipstick Chronicles, and this is by 4 different authors: Catherine Shea, Fiona Kelly, Vivian Leiber, and Lynn Emery. And again, this is one that could have done so much more if it had explained things on the back here. If you're someone like me, then you will go into a library or a bookstore or a yard sale, and you will just pick up anything that looks interesting, and you read the back, and if that seems interesting too, you'll pick it up. For me, the back of a book is really important because that's generally all I'm basing my reading choices on. Sometimes I'm basing them off of recommendations or movies or TV shows or Goodreads or something like that, but for the most part, this is it. This is what you got. So when the back doesn't match the inside, I get kind of frustrated, and that's putting it mildly. I did have a much longer review of this on my Goodreads, so you can check that out there. It's kind of in between a review and a rant, but I'll do a shortened version here. So, on the back, this explains that this is a chronicle of 5 women who all work together at a greeting card company, and it has a little blurb about each woman's sort of adventures. It does not anywhere say that, A, this is essentially erotica. Would have been nice to know, just because I have nothing against erotica. I do not mind having some sex in my reading. I would like to be forewarned. Another thing that was so bizarre, I still don't understand how this is, how this happened, what kind of oversight this was, but there are 5 different points on the back of this book for the 5 women. The book is 4 stories. It's not one book. Another thing that would have been useful to know from the back, perhaps, or even from the front. But there are only 4 stories, and each of the stories is one of these 5 things, which means we're missing one. If your math is any good, you'll realize that means we are missing one. There's a whole story here, listed on the back, that's not in the middle. And it confused me so much that I actually went online. I was thinking, did someone rip it out or cut it out? Like, this is clearly a very well-used book. Did someone remove it? Or was there an issue? Was this like a faulty copy? But no. They just, for some reason, described 5 stories on the back and have 4 stories in the book. So all that made me a little bit frustrated. 3 of the stories were exactly what you'd expect. Bog standard romance stories. Girl gets guy after some misunderstanding. There's lots of impossible sex, blah, blah, blah. There's more to it. There's some stuff in the last story that made me particularly angry, but if you want to read about that, you should check out my Goodreads review instead. And overall, this was just a massive crashing disappointment of a book. Do not read this. It's not good. And that's not it. My other big read over the past 2 months was that, as I mentioned in one of my last videos, I recently got this lovely hardback collection of the Harry Potter books. So unsurprisingly, what do you do when you get a new set of the Harry Potter books? You read all of the Harry Potter books. So I did actually spend a good chunk of the month rereading Harry Potter. There's only so much you can say about that. It's Harry Potter. It's awesome. End of story. And that was my reading for the month. So maybe not that short a wrap-up after all. That's like 16 books. I thought I had read less, but apparently not. Oopsie. I also have a bit of a catch-up video that I'm going to put a link to below that I'm posting at the same sort of time as this, which is going to explain not why I've been busy, because we all know that, and there's only so much I can say before that gets really repetitive, but some of the really exciting new stuff that I've been doing with my writing and with this channel, and some really exciting developments that I have coming up. And that is it for today. I'm going to go lay down and fan myself for about an hour now, I think. And I hope you enjoyed it. As always, comment and let me know what you thought. If you've read any of these, hey, we can just geek out about Harry Potter for a while, because that's always fun. And have a great day. Bye.